People who often like to have hours-long conversations, how do you manage to talk so long without running out of things to say, and doesn't it make you tired to talk for such a long time? With the right person, when you have a connection, sometimes conversation is practically effortless. There is a natural flow to conversation. Especially after you've known the person a while. I am an introvert, so it does usually make me tired to talk for a long time, yes. But there are a few people who have somehow managed to get into my inner introvert circle, and talking to them doesn't tire me. Oh man. Before I moved cities, there was this person I chatted for years online. Well, the week before I moved I had nothing to do, so we talked on the phone. First time. And it was great. Something like 18 hours? I used all the cordless phones in the house. And then dragged the corded phone to my room. Talked about everything, read passages from books we liked and shared thoughts about everything. It was great. And then I moved to new city, new job, had to make new friends, and we lost touch. She came to visit me once like 10 plus years ago, but I hadn't so it was a bit awkward. But fun times. Still my record for longest call. Reach out to them. Rekindle the friendship. Just went to check my messages, and the last message I got from her was 2012, and she came to visit in 2008. I really should reach out. Thanks. Well, it depends on the other person. If they give you really short answers and don't engage much, I run out of things to talk about really fast. But if the other person continues the conversation, before we know it, a few hours have passed. It's invigorating, if not dehydrating, to vibe with someone and swap stories and experiences with them for hours on end. Exactly, it takes two. Sometimes you're compatible with someone in that way, sometimes you aren't, sometimes you think you aren't, and then end up getting in the groove and talking for hours. My best friend and I talk for about 3 hours a day, sometimes 5 hours, sometimes a few times a day. We never run out of stuff to talk about. We're completely compatible. I know there's no one else I could do that with. I like to go for a walk with my wife. We go for like 5-6 hours and discuss the shit out of everything. With most other people you can't do that, but when you know someone and both of you share this ability to discuss abstract ideas just as focused as tomorrow's lunch, hours just go by. Edit, to make it clear, we don't walk 6 hours every day. But whenever we get a chance to walk for hours, we take a day off, arrange a babysitter and just head out the door. You sound like my wife and her best friend. They live in different cities and states, so yak on the phone for hours every day because they can't hang out. They shriek with laughter for 90% of the phone call. I have very close friends myself, but those two are on a whole other level. I'm generally introverted, but if you get me with the right people, I can easily talk for hours. I'll share a story of the best Valentine's Day I ever had. My plans kinda fell through. My roommates who were and still are together didn't have anything planned for Valentine's Day, they have their own thing. So we all ended up getting drunk together. Well, my homie started going on about Warhammer 40k, which I had only a vague knowledge of at the time. He proceeded to spend 3 hours explaining various things to me and looking up stuff. I couldn't help but admire his passion and I got into the lore myself. But we spent the entire night jumping from conversation to conversation about various genres until we both passed out on the couch. That was some fun times. I generally just don't know when to shut TF up. I generally don't know how to get the other person to shut up or otherwise end the conversation. We'd make a great team. Boundaries, I have a friend I really enjoy talking to, but anytime we talk it's 1 to 2 hours guaranteed. So I make sure I have absolutely nothing to go to, or I say right at the start of the call, hey, I've got this thing I'm doing at X time, so I'll have to go then. The difference between saying no and having boundaries is awe-inspiring. To the time I had none. I like long conversations because there is so much to talk about in this world. Talk about what you like, dislike, what you're for, and what you're against, what you find bland, and what you're passionate about. Talk about how something made you feel versus something that you learned through adversity or a failure you made that has given you perspective. It's hard to have long conversations with people who give one-word responses. I think your partner makes all the difference when it comes to this. I've had a few rare times where I couldn't get enough of someone, in which case, it almost doesn't matter what they say, I'm happy. That's when it's a pleasure, not a chore. Otherwise I just won't do it either. Me and my ex, we just clicked. We used to have 8+ hour video calls daily, just constantly talking. It was honestly amazing. I haven't met anyone like her since. Feels bad. Kind of same, used to talk to someone for like 6 to 8 hours every day but eventually just fell apart. Never met anyone like that either, kind of sad cause I'm an introvert and it's not easy to find people like that who you can talk to endlessly. Feels bad is right, haha. Depends on the person. My bestie, who I sadly don't see too often anymore, thanks pandemic, we'd literally lay on the couch and living room floor for hours, just chatting. We'd normally start by catching up on life things and then we'd discuss whatever's on our minds that might be controversial to others. She's one of maybe 3 people I can literally say anything and get no judgment. Sometimes, random thoughts that pop into my head that may not be appropriate in other settings, I'll blurt it out and she'd just go with the flow. Our chats normally go for hours. Just go with the flow. It helps if the other person does the same, of course. Actively listen and respond to what the person is saying. Don't save up things to say and say them when the other person is done talking. This is key. Just go with the flow. A lot of people don't have the flow. Like, almost every conversation seems unnatural and straining. I think you're spot on about the actively listening part though. If you make it your mission to find out what excites the other person, asking questions about their answers so they tell more and more, that's how you make a conversation go on, and the other person feels truly listened to and appreciated. That's true to a point. But it feels like a one-way conversation if you are asking all the questions. I think you must be able to bring something to table also, a good anecdote or experience relevant to the topic of the conversation. I don't fully agree with this. If you're the only one asking questions and there is no real flow, then that's mostly on the other person. Long conversations don't work like small talk, where you pick a sort of general, safe topic and both people take short turns swapping personal information and generalities. Long conversations work more like a discussion-based college class. You spend less time talking about yourself and more time talking about like how one cartoonist compares to a different cartoonist or how different fiber arts work or social norms in Renaissance Venice. Basically, it's more analytical and you're usually learning something. Also, don't just sit still. Go for a walk with the person. Or if you're talking on the phone, do chores while you talk. It helps keep you engaged and alert. I'm a chatterbox and I know a little bit about a lot of things, so I can always carry a conversation in some topic. It's also a form of socialization. I grew up in a society where talking was the heart of the evening. You don't go to dinner with your friends to have dinner. You go to talk, and the food is there to give you something to do while you converse. It's also quite stimulating and invigorating when you run into someone else who shares similar interests. One of my best friends would spend literally hours, I'm talking 3+ with me, just talking about different movies, scenes we enjoyed, shows, stories, etc. For the record, 80% of the time we're literally talking about things we've both seen, read. Yet we can still kill that many hours together talking about them. It reinforces and forges bonds between people. Edit, thank you kind internet stranger. Ugh, I go off on tangents all over the place, and so do the people I'm talking to. A lot of times it's like, what was I talking about? How did I get on the subject of my mom's car being in the shop? This is with friends and closer acquaintances, not with strangers. Me and my best mate can talk for hours on end, each conversation leads into the next. Lots of branching topics which all link together. Conversation might have started off with what games have you been playing lately? And an hour or two down the line we've ended up at why time travel in a film show is ultimately the worst idea. I am only capable of holding long conversations, I can't do smalltalk. On one hand I am just not interested in smalltalk, so I try my best to avoid it. On the other hand, if it actually happens it gets really weird very fast. I have a couple of topics that are very interesting to me and I spent a lot of time thinking about them, so if they come up in a conversation I can easily talk about them for hours and hours. I once had a 16-hour-long conversation with a friend. I was at his place and we talked for about 9 hours that day until it got late, so I went home and slept, and after I woke up I immediately went to his place again to finish the conversation talking for another 7 hours. This happened right after we shared a psychedelic experience. Both of us had a lot of mental progress that day. I learned a lot about my personality and behavior, and he ultimately stopped smoking and realized a bunch of other bad habits he worked on quitting. Of course, this is an extreme case, but I would honestly love to do that with more people. Low-key just thinking out loud. Don't know about you, but my inner dialogue never shuts up. I don't force anything. If they don't want to talk, then it's alright. There is no such thing as awkward silence. It's only awkward if you make it awkward. And then when I find someone whose hobbies are the same as mine, the conversation is just smooth. It's only awkward if you make it awkward. Best thing I've learned recently. Conversation should be fluid and never just cover one topic. The universe is infinite and therefore a conversation could go on forever. Just like other people have mentioned, it takes two. But if both people want to have a conversation, then it could be endless. I rarely have a conversation with my sister that lasts less than an hour. Another important factor is a genuine curiosity about everything. People love talking about themselves and their interests, so if you can find any kind of common ground, you've got a good conversation starter. Also, be truthful. If you just blindly and politely agree with everything that people say, they're going to feel that you're not being genuine and want out. For example, so do you play video games? No, I really don't have the coordination for that. But I'm an avid Sudoku puzzler. I taught myself during a very boring lecture in college, and now I can't stop. You have just opened up several paths for conversation there. That's the key, is to leave the paths open. Sometimes talking can be tiring depending on the person and what else we might be doing. Especially if I'm talking to a really negative person, it really wipes me out. Usually starts with asking something about their experience or expertise. They have deep and interesting conversations that roll through a lot of different topics. I don't like small talk, but I've found most people have something they will talk about for hours. You just need to find the right entry point and a somewhat private space, of course. It usually bounces between funny inside joke type talk and more personal conversations or academic discussion for me. Listening more than talking. If you're interested, you'll ask questions, and people love to be heard and feel like they're interesting, so chats can go on for hours by simply prompting your companion. I think though, when it comes to a longer conversation, you also need to know how to insert related anecdotes and things like that. For me, it's the conversation partner. If they are of a similar mindset, you are golden. Me and my best friend have been having the same conversation for about 7 months now, interrupted only by life, haha. My grandpa says that if you can tell something with 2 words and you tell it with 2 sentences, you must die. Functional social skills. I feel this can be emphasized enough. Socializing is a skill set combining active listening, posture, tone, knowing one's audience, and being informed and confident enough to contribute to conversations with asides, jokes, references, and memes. It takes practice. So call your mother and get some practice in. Totally true. I was painfully shy for a while. I became a bartender and put myself in uncomfortable situations because I wanted to build social skills. It worked. So call your mother and get some practice in. I see someone had functional parents. Lolts. Depends on the person I'm with. Also, life is filled with literally so much stuff. Work life, love life, my favorite TV shows. The list can go on. It's called ADHD, ad chef's kiss. But for typical neurological brains, I think the trick is to find things you find interesting and talk about that. Try to engage the other by using your imagination. For example, if you think going to space and space flights is interesting, you could say, would you want to go to Mars when we can? But also just general things like, do you like reading? What do you love the most about it? But if you get tired, obviously I don't think you'll make the greatest conversation partner, so maybe it's more about the quality of the conversation than it is about quantity. I go on walks with my best friend nearly every day. We usually just start with small talk, like how was your day, etc., then the conversation just casually evolves. Sometimes we'll talk about a specific thing that we did that day, like say I've been playing Red Dead, I'll tell him which parts of the story I've done today, and he'll then continue on with video games he's played lately. Then we might jump to him having played something at his dad's place, and then we get to talk about that or what else he has been doing over there. Going for walks or being in public is generally a good idea when you're planning on having a long conversation. You can point out certain people or things and then go from there. Like, wow, that's a cool garden, I'd definitely put that thing in my garden if I had the chance, or I'd want it to look like this and that and so on. Then the other person gets their chance to share what they'd want their garden to look like. And yes, personally, I find it sometimes gets exhausting. Then we just sit down somewhere and hang out in silence. Lots of people think that could be awkward, but it really isn't when you're with the right person. It can be great to just hang out and be quiet together, especially after a long conversation. You can process everything the other person has told you, think about new things you might have learned, or just collect your thoughts so you know what else to talk about next. Then just start talking again when you've got an idea what you want to speak about. We do take breaks from hanging out when we're too exhausted from it, because that definitely happens sometimes. Then we'll just stay by ourselves for a day or two, and then when we feel like it, we hang out again. It also really depends on the person you're talking to. If they're not very responsive, it's definitely harder. I just blabber on about anything and everything because I get nervous when it's a person I don't know that well and tend to overshare when nervous, and then sometimes they randomly get engaged at a certain topic that they find interesting as well, and then we can actually talk. And if not, if you're going for a walk, you can still just enjoy the silence and your surroundings together. The best conversations I've had took place on long walks or hikes. Something about it is just conducive to conversation. I remember a time when I talked with these 3 dudes for 7 hours. It was amazing. We talked about politics, philosophy, ethics, religion, history, and all sorts of other things. We loved talking to each other so much, we did that every week, sometimes twice a week when we were all free. We spent over 100 hours together just talking about everything you could imagine. We eventually added a 5th to the group, and he was amazing too. Man, I miss that about college. Just talking to people, you know? I also remember how I used to stay up all night, cuddling with my, now ex-GF, and we would talk about anything you could imagine. We talked about love, the stars, horses, books, the future, science and technology, metaphysics. Man, I really do miss those kinds of conversations. I also had friends who would be able to just come over, and we would just talk about DD, 5E, practically all day. Hell, at the beginning of the pandemic, this one dude would come over almost every other day, and we would write stories together and plan different DD campaigns and homebrew. It was super fun. Basically, it's all about the people you surround yourself with. If you meet a dude who will only give you one-word answers, like "How was your day?" Fine, that's boring. I want to hear about how you were and what happened. Tell me about every little thing that made you happy or pissed off. I want to know, and I will return the favor. I will tell you everything I can. Be it a lover, best friends, fellow philosophers, or random people on the street, so long as you have two-way communication, that's all you will ever need. 1. Have interesting things to say. 2. Think about the things you say. 3. Be interested in the things the other person says. 4. Think about the things the other person says. Blah blah blah, and all of a sudden it's been 3 hours. I was born and bred in Ireland. Talking is what we do best. An item on my bucket list is to go kiss the Blarney Stone and receive the gift of the gab. Don't do that. The local teenagers go there to drink and piss on the stone. A lot of factors count in. My boyfriend and I sometimes end up talking for 8 hours straight, and sometimes we run out of things to talk about, so we either stay on vid call and go about our day or cut the call and do our work. It honestly depends on the person on the other side. Sometimes though, you might not have the energy to talk, and I think the other person should respect it if you're feeling like that.